I'm Kevin O'Keefe. I'm the president of the St. Vartan Park Conservancy, and we're right now in the St. Vartan Park Garden.
I'm Kristen Gonzalez. I'm the state senator for Senate District 59, covering Western Queens, Northern Brooklyn, and the east side of Manhattan.
We connected right away because your love for green space. I think we're both can consider ourselves environmentalists. Can you talk about your early involvement in climate and all the importance of fighting for the right causes when it comes to the change in the climate?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was born and raised in Elmhurst, Queens. And, there weren't a ton of green spaces, but our local park was one of the few spaces that we had for my own family to go on a weekend where we didn't necessarily have to spend money, but could just enjoy ourselves and really, build a sense of community by meeting other kids and other families. And so I always had a love for parks and green space, just knowing them to be a pillar of a community, right? And, as a high school student, I started learning about the climate crisis and the connection between the need for green space and the need for climate justice, and how we can support that larger cause by having more green space. And I, started organizing really young. I got involved in my college campus. We tried to push for fossil fuel divestment at Columbia. And then once I graduated in Astoria, we worked on opposing the energy fracked gas power plant and won that fight. So a lot of my own political learning and organizing history has been rooted in climate justice, but also just rooted in the baseline need for us to have clean air, green space, and places for New Yorkers to go where we don't have to spend money.
And I think also accessibility and inclusivity. I know
Yeah.
we were able to successfully fight to open this garden. It was locked to the general public, and now it's open for anybody. So inclusivity,
Yeah.
accessibility to all. I know that's probably a really key part of what you're trying to do for the environment.
Yeah. I think we always need to have an eye for inclusivity and accessibility when it comes to our park spaces. We certainly need to think about what accessibility looks like, even in terms of, socioeconomic statuses, but also on a community level. So one of the most surprising things I learned about our Senate District 59 is that in this part of Manhattan, we have one of the most starved communities for green space in the entire city. And so there isn't a lot of green space access for our neighbors right here. And that's something that we absolutely deserve here. So I was really excited to see St. Vartan Park and the Conservancy really taking that issue on and advocating for our local park space. And certainly doing such an incredible job right here, where I see folks coming in, feeling welcomed, enjoying the space, on nice days like today, but also fighting for spaces like across the street that have been historically blocked off, but could be real resources for this community, which again is so starved of green space.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing up the MTA space. And just to be clear, there is a triangular piece of beautiful nature with trees and grass and bushes. It's right over the Queens Midtown Tunnel. Just like this garden was locked for decades to the general public,
Yeah.
that locks out the general public. St. Vartan Park Conservancy volunteer team has said what we've done to this garden, all volunteer, we would do for that space as well. So that's not an excuse that the MTA won't have somebody that would keep up the space. You've seen some of the reasons why the MTA says we don't necessarily want that to happen. What can we do together, the Conservancy, the community, you, your team, to make this happen?
That's a great question. So I always advocate for organizing and being involved, having our voices heard. I was an organizer before I took office. I'm an organizer in office. And so I see the role of our office as a partner and a support for the work that is already being done here on St. Vartan Park to engage local residents and bring them into this process so that we can build a broader coalition that fights for this new MTA plot. I know as an office, we're going to push the MTA on this. We've always believed that public land should stay in public hands and also be for the maximum public good. We don't have a ton of public land left in New York City or New York State, unfortunately. So it is part of our mission to ensure that we're keeping this land public, but we're also opening it up if we can to ensure that the public can enjoy it too. Because as you mentioned, there's beautiful green space right across the street, but gates shouldn't be the barrier that keeps us from it.
Thank you. And is there anything, and we will continue to fight with you and advocate for with you to
Yeah.
open that up? Is there anything legislatively that could be done that that we wouldn't have the power to do?
Honestly, we organize on the inside, which also means just working with agencies and authorities like the MTA to talk about what potential solution can happen, hear their concerns, but also make sure that we come to a compromise that works for the community. And so we're going to ensure that, we look at their response, we look at the concerns around some of the infrastructure, but then find the right solution that gives us access to that green space. Because at the very minimum, in a neighborhood that's been so starved for it, that's really got to be our end goal in every one of our fights. So we'll certainly be working with with all of you, hoping that folks who are seeing this will join in on the fight. And I think the last thing I also wanted to note that's really important is just what a long history St. Vartan Park has had in this community. This park has been here since 1904. It's had 5 renovations and about $1 million put into this space. And certainly we're not looking at a timeline as long as that for the MTA plot. But what it really shows is just there is history that we need to preserve here, and being able to expand that park or expand this park to a plot across the street will be part of that longer history and story in this neighborhood of us fighting, preserving, and celebrating our green spaces here.
That's wonderful. And it's mental health too. And this is a
Yeah.
whole different discussion, but we have so many people that come into this
Yeah.
green space and say, I just needed a mental health break. It's so wonderful you're
Yeah.
here. I just needed to get away from, in one case, someone who works at Bellevue said, I just needed someplace to get away for a few minutes. So to
Yeah.
us, we could have the same place across the street.
We should definitely work to bring as many people to this park as possible, if not only for just every single person who can, to see how beautiful this space is, how much love has been put into it. I know that we've been planting some new parts of the garden recently, so I'm here for bringing every single person we possibly can to the park, and certainly can invite our partners in government to do the same. I also wanted to go back to a point that you made that was really important. When we talk about park space, I know I mentioned climate justice, but it really is so important for the health of the community. We're talking mental health, but also physical health, right? It helps with the air quality in the neighborhood. And so we really see not only this fight as part of a climate justice fight, but just the idea of having a dignified life in New York, right? Everyone deserves to have access to spaces that help with their mental health, that help clean the air, and certainly help reduce the amount of heat that can be really, again, physically affecting to our neighbors in an area that is going to be a heat zone because of the lack of green space.
Right. And there's a lot of other things like bioswales that we're doing just outside the garden, fighting for that as well, because
Yeah.
I know with the flooding that we have seen, and we'll probably see more, unfortunately, a lot
Yeah.
more, is to make sure that we capture that rain so it doesn't run off and take debris with it to the East River. So there's a lot of things, not just this garden, but a block away where the East River is, that we need to think about our future
Yeah.
climate.
Yeah, I mean, Senate District 59 is a waterfront district. So we on both sides of the East River have communities that are affected by flooding. And one of our biggest priorities has been environmental justice and waterfront resiliency. We have 2 state parks, Gantry State Park, Bushwick Inlet. But on this side of the river, we need to make sure we have as many parks as possible to help mitigate that flooding and make sure we're also prepared as the climate crisis has been worsening.
Green space is so important, especially a place like Midtown East where it's so starved.
Yeah.
If you can run down, and I know there's a lot of advantages of making sure that we're attuned to climate change.
Yeah, so I am lucky to have 2 state parks in the district, like I mentioned, Gantry State Park, Bushwick Inlet. And what we're doing there is really, figuring out how to have a continuous waterway of green space that connects our Queens and Brooklyn community. I want to make sure on this side of the river we have, again, connected green space. That's why we're so focused on expanding. And, this is a climate justice, environmental justice district. I talked about the flooding. I talked about the need for green space here. For example, on the Queens side, we have a power plant known as the Ravenswood Power Plant, right? And Big Al, I guess, colloquially. And we're looking to transition that to renewable energy. So part of the work I've done in the last year and a half in office is fighting to push the Build Public Renewables Act, which gave New York the ability to build and own its own renewable energy sources for the first time ever. And that was a multi-year organizing fight that I took on before office and was really proud as part of the Energy Committee in the Senate to get across the finish line in last year, last year's session. And so we're going to keep fighting for additional measures that improve our, Senate District 59. But what I really love to also talk about in Midtown East is how Stuytown, for example, also worked to organize and fight off a power plant. So we not only see us being unified in our fight for green spaces, our need for green spaces, our fight for environmental justice, but in the climate movement, it is so universally held that we need to have more renewable energy sources and reduce our investment in fossil fuel infrastructure. So I'm really proud that this is actually one of the things that unites our three boroughs in a really wonderful and beautiful way. It's something we're going to continue to work on, both in the Senate, but right back home in Senate District 59. So I do want to also make a pitch for St. Vartan Park, because anyone who wants to be part of these fights should join, should be a supporter of the park, and should have their voices heard, because collectively we can determine a better future for our neighborhood.
Very well said. And we, even though we're focused on the park, we are aware, and we were so happy to see that combined heat and power plant at Stuyvesant Town not happen. So I think it's safe to say that when you're an environmentalist, as we feel we are here, you are attuned to things outside the park as well. So that's very important. Thank you for this discussion. I did want to touch on one thing, because we didn't do it, and it wouldn't be, I don't think, a discussion: trees. So we know that trees are important. We know all the benefits that they provide, especially with climate change. What can we do as a community, or what can legislators do?
We have to be working across levels of government when it comes to our parks, right? So again, I mentioned state parks. We've increased funding for state parks, so that benefits the state parks in the district. But when it comes to city level parks, and again, the investment in trees, that is something that's really owned by the city. So I know our council member here has been really passionate about this issue. I know it's going to take not only, of course, our council member, but me as state senator, our assembly member, our congressional members, everyone across levels of government, to help put a little bit of that urgency on the city to back our city council member up and get the trees and expansion that we need, the investment that we need. So again, that's a cross level of government fight, and something that I'm really excited to work on with all of our electeds.
Thank you very much.
Forward. Yeah. So one of my favorite things about St. Vartan Park is just how it feels like an oasis in a concrete jungle. You step into the park, and the way that it's designed really is to just bring you in and give you a peace of mind that would make you forget that you're just 10 feet away from the street, right? And so the way that it's designed, I think, is one of my favorite things. And certainly the local, I guess, folks that come in. We were, previous to this filming, just waving at some of the folks passing by who come in because they're regulars. So I think the second part is the people that you see who are returning characters, and the sense of community that you get when you walk in. And that brings me to the second part of the question, which is, why our parks are so important for our community. And it really is just giving people space to connect, giving people space that is inclusive, no matter who you are, where you are, being able to come in and find that community. And then, what I've seen in this park personally is just so many families and so many young children coming in. And what that tells me is we're teaching the next generation about the importance of our parks, the importance of protecting our green spaces, and giving them a personal connection, not only to this neighborhood, but to, the environment that especially New York City students don't always get to have. So I think that has been one of my favorite parts of being part of this community.
And if I could just, exactly, you echoed my thoughts, but also that we have educational programs here, that we have children come into the garden and learn about. We had a group here last week that released some butterflies, some native butterflies that they had raised in their classroom across the street. These are the type of we have a robin's nest here. We've been teaching kids about the whole fledgling system and how that works. So to us, we're educators as well with this space.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing I want to say, and definitely invite folks to, is just to come. If you haven't visited the park before, come by, say hello. You'll probably see Kevin. Sometimes you'll see me. Sometimes you'll see our other electeds. But we want to see more people enjoy the space. There are already so many, but if you haven't come by, I definitely recommend it. So Thank you to Kevin and the folks who've been putting love into the space.
And it is
It's
open to
beautiful.
everybody.
Yeah.
We are super inclusive and have been since day one, and that's important for us to keep it that way.
Yeah. Amazing.